Hello, my name is Betty. I'm a 35-year-old corporate professional, and I've been married to Scott for 4 years. Scott, who is 2 years older than me, works at a company affiliated with mine. Since the beginning of our marriage, we've been living with his parents in a dual-family home setup. Scott, the younger of 2 brothers, has an older brother named Walter. Before our marriage, Walter and his parents were the primary residents of the home. Walter's wife, Judy, known for her chatty personality and competitive nature, frequently clashed with her assertive mother-in-law. These ongoing disagreements eventually led Walter and his father to move out. Scott and I had never considered living separately from his parents, so it was quite a surprise when Scott's mother announced that we would be moving in with them right after our wedding. I had assumed we would stay in my apartment, which was convenient for my work commute, until we were ready to start a family. However, it became clear that staying with Scott's family was an established tradition. Despite my initial hesitation, we decided that the commute would be similar whether we lived in Scott's apartment or moved into his parents' home. The family home, built by Scott's grandfather, included a main house and a guest house, providing ample privacy. With some reluctance, we agreed to move in. Soon, I began to regret our decision. Scott's mother, in her mid-60s, started experiencing back pain and dizziness, which meant the responsibility for all household chores, cleaning, laundry, and shopping, fell increasingly on me. Balancing these tasks with a full-time job and sharing chores with Scott barely kept both our lives and his parents' household manageable. Then, an unexpected financial burden appeared. The guest house, although seemingly fine from the outside, required extensive renovations once we began inspecting it. The bathroom, kitchen, roof, and floors all needed major repairs. We committed to covering these renovation costs, but were blindsided when my mother-in-law demanded that the main house be renovated as well after seeing the improvements to the guest house. The idea of fixing up our living space while also upgrading theirs felt overwhelming, and we struggled with the financial strain of handling both at once. Betty's job was essential for supporting us, especially given the increasing demands from my in-laws. My mother-in-law insisted, by marrying Scott, you're expected to serve us in return. They didn't just expect renovations, they now wanted upscale furniture and modern appliances to match the refurbished rooms. On top of that, they expected us to cover everything from groceries to other household necessities. These demands made it nearly impossible for Scott and me to save any money each month. As our 3rd anniversary approached, my brother-in-law Walter and his wife Judy dropped a bombshell: we're moving back in, and you need to move out. Judy explained that Walter had been laid off. Although he could have stayed, he chose to leave to help a coworker with children keep his job. Despite having 2-year-old twins himself, Walter's prestigious education made him a more capable option. Faced with this ultimatum, Scott and I spent hours negotiating with my in-laws, but it was in vain. Eventually, we had to concede. Fine, we'll move out this week, I said, resigning ourselves to the situation. Trying to keep things light, I told my mother-in-law and father-in-law, we've learned a lot about family from you. It's time to put that wisdom into practice. Right, Scott? My husband chuckled and agreed. Yeah, just like Betty said, we're happy to do it. Case closed. With that, Scott and I turned away from our amused in-laws and began packing up the guest house. Within 3 weeks, we had movers lined up and managed to relocate just in time. We opted for the full packing service to accommodate our tight schedule and timed the move during my in-laws' regular karaoke lunch with friends to avoid any disputes over our belongings. We wrapped everything up in 4 days, using our paid leave, and started our new life. However, one day at work, I received a call from the front desk. Someone claiming to be family was there to see me. I had anticipated this visit but hadn't expected it to be so abrupt. Instead of approaching Scott, I quickly texted him about the unexpected visitor and prepared for the potential hassle. Scott advised me to politely ask Emma to schedule a formal meeting to keep things professional and avoid office disruptions. After passing on this message to the front desk, we managed to have our in-laws leave without further incident. That evening, as Scott and I arrived at the parking lot of our former residence, where his parents still lived, we were met with an unexpected reception. His parents, along with Walter and Judy, rushed out to greet us. To my surprise, both in-laws had one of Walter's twins strapped to their backs. As I locked the car, Walter confronted us aggressively. "Hey, how dare you show up here in my parents' cars?" Scott stayed calm, replying, "Your parents' cars? Which ones are those?" This only seemed to infuriate Walter further. "The cars you both drove up in, obviously," he snapped. "Well, Walter, both these cars were bought by us. Our names are on the registration certificates. Would you like to see them?" Scott offered, stepping forward, frustrated by how our parents acted as if they owned everything. I added, "We overlooked it when we all lived together, but now there's no need to borrow them. Don't forget your dad has that old minivan he used for work." Judy interjected sharply, "Who cares about that old car?" "But it's perfect for the twins, isn't it? You can fit 2 car seats," I countered, trying to introduce some reason into the conversation. Our discussion seemed to make our in-laws uncomfortable, especially as Walter was being reprimanded about the car ownership. They then shifted the topic to the furniture and appliances, accusing us of stealing them by taking them while Walter argued they were away. "So taking things from both the main house and the guest house is stealing." "Yes, and Walter and I can't live without those," Judy chimed in, supporting his claim. Scott tried to reason. "I understand your point, but since we're using the guest house, there's no need to take anything from the main house as well." I asked, "Why isn't everything we all contributed to still ours?" "That's sheer arrogance," father-in-law retorted. "Once you gave it, it's ours." Scott responded, "We never gave you anything. We simply lent it. There's no record of us transferring ownership. While we lived together, lending things out was just convenient. But now that we're in separate homes, continuing to share everything doesn't make sense," he explained, sharing a knowing look with me. "We have our own washing machines and fridges now. You don't need duplicates, do you?" The discussion continued. "Exactly. So why would we lend them out again? Besides, putting everything into our new, smaller place would just make it more cramped," Scott concluded. We exchanged smiles, both aware of how packed our current living space was. "It's true, we're pretty squeezed in," I admitted. "Absolutely, it's a tight fit," Scott agreed. Judy began to respond, but we interrupted. "Remember, it's a storage room, so it's supposed to be cramped," I chuckled. "Exactly, until the official lease is signed. This is how it has to be," Scott added, leaving Walter and the others looking thoroughly puzzled. Then Scott dropped some unexpected news. "Oh, by the way, we're moving to Philadelphia next month," he said. We had initially turned down offers for positions at our company's headquarters due to our living situation. Now that we were free from that complication, we had accepted the transfers and received internal notifications about our new roles. Even better, a colleague of Scott's, who was going overseas for an extended period, had a high-rise condo in Philadelphia that he wanted to sell, and everything fell into place quickly. "You guys are moving to a high-rise condo in Philadelphia? Life sure does throw some curveballs," Walter remarked. "Totally. If you and everyone else hadn't pushed us to move out, we wouldn't have stumbled upon this opportunity," I replied. "But how could you even afford a high-rise condo? That seems unbelievable," Judy questioned. "That's thanks to Betty's dad. He provided the down payment," Scott revealed. "Betty's dad just gave you the down payment?" Judy asked, clearly surprised. "Yes, my sister is inheriting the family property, so he decided to help us out," I explained, feeling grateful for the unexpected support that turned our situation around. This arrangement was a bit of a trade-off. The previous owner asked us to keep his modern altar until he returns to the country, so I negotiated a lower asking price in exchange. He agreed, giving us a significant discount. Upon hearing about the discount, Judy, who was nearby, burst into tears, exclaiming, "That's so unfair. I'd rather have a high-rise condo in Philadelphia than live in Nashville." The in-laws, who had been quiet until now, suddenly changed their tone and began praising Scott. "Well, it looks like Scott really has it together, doesn't he? Just like his mother. Scott is following in my footsteps," they chimed in. Ignoring their comments, Scott turned to me and said, "Living in a high-rise in Philadelphia, everyone's going to be so jealous. When are you moving? We must visit. If we're going to Philadelphia, you should come too," I suggested. The idea seemed to intrigue them, but the mood shifted abruptly as Walter and Judy stopped their arguing and turned to confront the in-laws. "What are you talking about? Walter's being downsized, so you'll have to support us. Plus, until I find another job, Judy will have to go back to work early from her parental leave. You'll need to take care of the household chores and the twins," they demanded. As tension mounted, Walter and Judy marched up to the in-laws, who were carrying the twins. The babies, sensing the stress, started crying, waking up the entire neighborhood. Neighbors began to gather at a distance from the garage, while the in-laws turned beet red. Scott finally intervened, addressing Walter and the others. "Stop just standing there." His laughter echoed as he added, "This is like a battle of wits between a raccoon and a fox." Turning to the bewildered faces around him, he grinned and explained, "If both couples, us and you, don't work, our family finances will collapse next month." Fuming, Judy demanded to know what this meant. I stepped in. "Judy, you thought that if Walter lost his job, it would be just an inconvenience, but it's far more serious. Without both couples contributing, everything falls apart." The gravity of this revelation settled over the group, highlighting the precarious balance of our family finances. When you moved into the in-laws' rental property, you assumed you could shift the utility bills and grocery costs onto them, right? Our income was supporting this household. "But that can't continue," I said, laying out a truth that seemed to confuse them. "Oh, and you'll need to start contributing to the mortgage payments for the house renovations. It's in father-in-law's name," Scott added. "Why is it in his name?" I asked, catching the in-laws off guard. Scott took over. "I initially wanted the loan in my name since I was paying for it, but Dad insisted it would be shameful not to have it in his name, so we used the property as collateral. Until now, we've been transferring money into Dad's account to cover the loan." "Walter, you'll need to contribute starting next month," Scott explained. The in-laws and Walter immediately opposed this idea, but Scott stood firm. "We're going to relinquish our claim on the inheritance. Walter, as the heir, you'd better take good care of your parents and the family home," I told him decisively. "But children are still obligated to care for their parents, right?" my mother-in-law insisted. Scott dismissed her comment. "Well, considering we've been covering your living expenses and loan payments for the past 4 years, I'd say that pretty much balances out any future caregiving costs I'd have as a son, don't you think?" "Let's go home, love," Scott said, looking at me. "Goodbye, everyone." With that, we turned to leave, ready to start anew, free from the financial burdens and expectations that had weighed us down. "I doubt we'll meet again. Take care," I said, bidding farewell. The next day, Scott and I sold off the furniture and appliances we had taken from the main house, as well as 2 cars we no longer needed. When Judy texted asking for these items, I simply replied, "Why?" and then blocked her number. Our special leave for the job transfer wasn't enough, so we had to use our remaining paid vacation days to complete the move. Although buying the high-rise condo would take more time, we decided to rent for the first 2 years, thankfully from an apartment owned by my boss, who generously helped us out. As the weekend arrived, bringing a much-needed calm after the whirlwind of recent events, we sat looking out at the city lights. Breaking the silence, I said, "I know this has been a hassle, but thanks for sticking with me." I felt truly grateful for Scott's patience through it all. "What's with the formal tone all of a sudden?" Scott joked. But then his expression turned serious. "When we first got married and the idea of living together came up, I should have thought things through better. I was just happy you chose me over Walter, who was the favorite since we were kids." He continued, reflecting on our past decisions. We had mindlessly followed his parents' wishes until they told us to make room for Walter and his family due to the company restructuring. It struck me, how could they demand so much after being such a burden on us financially and otherwise? Scott added, "And then I thought about how much your parents must worry about you given our situation," acknowledging the complexities of our intertwined family dynamics. We both sat there contemplating our fresh start, determined to make the most of it away from the demands and expectations that had once confined us. Scott shared that he had sent an apology email to my parents, expressing his regrets about our past challenges. Their response was unexpectedly warm. They assured us that if we committed to making our daughter happy moving forward, the past missteps could be forgiven. This encouraging reply made it easier to discuss financial matters, and they lent us the down payment for our new home without any complications. Scott made a heartfelt promise to do everything within his power to safeguard our life together, just the two of us, and hopefully our future children if we were blessed to have any. Meanwhile, my in-laws were facing their own set of struggles. Despite tapping into their retirement funds, they could barely manage the loan payments for their home renovations. With Walter's job search yielding no results, they were reliant on Judy's salary now that she was back at work. The stress was palpable, often leading to loud arguments that could be heard outside their home. A former colleague reached out to me with rumors that they might skip town, as they had ceased all communication with Scott and me. In a desperate attempt to reconnect, they even tried contacting my parents, but my father had promptly changed his phone number. This seemingly small act was significant, reflecting his stance on setting boundaries after my in-laws had belittled my family and overlooked basic courtesies before our marriage. Now, with almost no way to reach us, it seemed their past treatment of others was finally coming back to haunt them. It was a classic case of what goes around comes around, a reminder that you reap what you sow.